want to know what you're fighting for. Podcast by George. 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 Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite theme song. I just love that. That's what I call Podcast by George singers. A couple of young daughters of a viewer doing the Ron Placone version of Podcast by George. Thanks again, everybody, for coming on in. Let me say hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. You know, we've been all around the world. Podcast by George is getting around, and we've had some great stories on recently that I hope you have caught. You can go back and watch them on an archival basis on YouTube and Facebook and all of the audio platforms. I mean, we were live from Fort Myers Beach, Florida, with a city councilman that was almost up to his neck. He was on the second floor of a house anyway, in the floods, in that water down there in Fort Myers. He stayed behind and he talked about that decision, and he admits it was not a good one. That's Dan Ellers. I mean, that was like the day or the 2 days after the hurricane went through. I thought that was pretty amazing stuff. And of course, we had TJ Gardner down there volunteering, helping folks out in Fort Myers. And then just Friday of last week, we had Serhiy, the Ukraine musician, a friend of Podcast by George. He was on talking about the missiles coming into Kiev, where he stayed behind. That's where he is. And we talked specifically about drones. And drones are in the news in Kiev. You can check that out on AP today. That is a major issue, but we were talking about it on Friday. Well, anyway, that's all in the past. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. Today, we're going to be talking about something I really like to talk about, and I like to talk about it with this guy. Folks, it's Captain John Cox. He's coming back on the Podcast by George LiveLine. And Captain Cox, of course, is a veteran major airline corporate and general aviation pilot. He's flown over 14,000 hours with over 10,000 in command of jet airliners. Additionally, he's flown as an instructor, a check pilot, a test pilot. In addition to his extensive involvement in global air safety, Captain Cox authors the Ask the Captain column for USA Today. We're going to have that. We're going to bring one of those up and discuss it here a little bit later on. He serves as the aviation analyst for NBC News and provides expertise to numerous other media outlets, including, I'm proud to say, Podcast by George. God, he's a good guy for doing that. He also frequently appears as an expert on the television programs Air Disasters and Why Planes Crash. I got a little clip on that we're going to talk about later. He's his day job, I like to say, is Chief Executive Officer, Safety Operating Systems in Washington, D.C. And, of course, he has clients all around the globe. So let's bring him in here and say good morning to the good captain. Hi, Captain Cox.
Good morning, George.
You know, I want to get right to it here. That was kind of a long open for me, and I don't normally do that. People appreciate the fact that we get right to it here on the show, and then I also am respectful of your time. So I want to bring this up on screen here and talk about this. This is something that is very timely. It's happening right now. It says, this is from the Associated Press, families are seeking truth as Air France, they face a crash trial. This is interesting, folks. Bring this up so that I can read it. Nicholas Toulouse had just proposed marriage to his girlfriend. Nelson Marinho Jr. was heading off on a new oil exploration job. Eric Lamy was about to celebrate his 38th birthday. And these are people, folks. This is what we talk about all the time on the show. This is their lives we're talking about. They were among 228 people killed in 2009 when their storm-tossed Air France flight from Rio de Janeiro to Paris slammed into the Atlantic. After more than a decade of legal battles, their families have a chance at justice in a courtroom. That's kind of interesting wording, but let's move along here. Aviation industry heavyweights Airbus and Air France are charged with manslaughter in a trial that opens today, over the crash of Flight 447 on June 1st, 2009. The worst plane crash in Air France history, and one of the worst in aviation history, period, folks. It killed people of 33 nationalities and had lasting impact, leading to changes in air safety regulations, how pilots are trained, and the use of airspeed sensors. This is interesting. We're going to talk about that. It almost didn't come to trial. The companies insist they are not criminally responsible, and Air France has already compensated families. Investigators argued for dropping the case, but unusually, judges overruled them and sent the case to court. Now, the trial is expected to focus on two key factors: the icing over of external sensors called pitot tubes and pilot error. The captain will talk all about that. The Airbus A330-200 disappeared from radars over the Atlantic Ocean between Brazil and Senegal with 216 passengers. 12 crew members perished also. The first debris was only spotted at sea 5 days later, and it wasn't until 2011 that the plane and its black box recorders were located on the ocean floor in an unprecedented search effort at depths of more than 13,000 feet. Okay, I'm going to stop right there because there's the map. There's about where it went down. We covered a lot of things there just right off of the open, Captain. But I don't know, maybe I want you to start off here by talking about this plane, the Airbus A330. And I've got a clip here that I'll bring up while you explain to us about this aircraft.
The A330 is a veteran airliner. It's been in service since probably the late 80s, early 90s. Very widely used. I've flown on it countless times. And so it's airliner for passengers. It's a good airliner for the airlines. It's reliable, it's well designed, and it's a mature airplane.
And the safety record on this particular plane has been good overall. Now, I know when it came out, it was considered to be kind of a modern marvel. I mean, all planes are when they come out, but this one was kind of taking us from the analog era to the digital era.
It was one of the early fly-by-wire airplanes that are wide bodies, long-range airplanes. So it has served us very well, and I mean, I like the airplane. I know a lot of people that have flown it, and it's what I would consider a great addition to the commercial airline fleet.
Now, there's one thing that is significant about this plane. I don't know that it was the first. You would know, of course, but it is the fact that it has a side stick instead of a yoke, kind of a Airbus versus Boeing thing. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I flew the Airbus for 6 years, and the last 6 years when I was with the airline. And so I had an opportunity to transition from the traditional yoke to a side stick. I found it very intuitive. I found it easy. You could put the airplane anywhere you needed to, in three dimensions. I liked the side stick actually better than the yoke in most conditions. So I think Airbus was wise, and more you're seeing both corporate airplanes such as Gulfstream, such as Dassault, they're going to the side stick as well. I think it's the future, and I think the yoke will eventually be part of the past.
Now, you may not have flown this route, but you're familiar with it, and it again plays into this. Tell us where this plane went down and what's unique about this flight route.
Well, going from Rio de Janeiro to Paris, obviously you go through the equator, and there's an area of weather between the northern and southern hemispheres called the tropical zone, and it's notorious for bringing up rain showers and thunderstorms because you have two large air masses, better said, that are interacting with each other, and it can cause some turbulence. It can cause basically disturbance. And so it's an area that when you're flying through, you want to be very, very careful of.
All right, good. I want to bring this comment up on screen from a podcast by George Viewer. If I can get there's Matt Grunwald. He says, naked pilots. Okay, so that is coming up, folks. This is the little graphic that I used on Facebook to promote the show. And I just want to tell everybody it's coming up. We're going to get to the serious stuff here, and then we're going to get to this fun and frivolity, which turned out not to be very fun or frivolous at all for those involved. That's coming up very shortly. But all right, let's get back to this. I want to bring this graphic back up again. This is where the plane went down. Now, there's also kind of a dead zone or something with communications in this area, and they were in it. Is that right?
Well, anytime you're a pretty good distance from land, you're dependent on long-range communication and navigation for that matter. So they have high-frequency radios, satellite communications that's available. They have to use the traditional radios that you use to talk to domestic air traffic control or out of range because they're VHF, very high frequency, and they're limited to line of sight. And you're so far off the coast that there is no longer a line of sight with that. So you revert back to oceanic procedures, which are a little bit more cumbersome than traditional domestic air traffic procedures. So it slows things down a little bit, but it's very effective. I mean, we've been using it since the 30s.
Okay, so what little I know about it, 228 people, souls on board. They take off from Rio de Janeiro. They're headed to Paris. They fly into a storm, which about where this is at. They're into these other issues with radio communications that we talked about, but all of these things are not that significant or pressing. What was different about it, or unique, or contributing factors, perhaps there were two junior pilots that were at the controls. The more experienced captain was taking a rest break. And let me go ahead and continue here, and we'll get into some of that. France's Accident Investigation Agency, BEA, found that the accident involved a cascading series of events with no single cause. So underscore that, Captain. You've been looking at these things for decades. It always is this way. There's never just one factor. It's always
Right.
a series of things. Kind of a Murphy's Law comes into play here.
It is. I mean, accidents are the result of multiple causes. The fact that, and let me be really clear, is you want pilots to be well rested, particularly when it comes to the landing portion of it. And one way that they do that is they rotate time off when they can relax and not have the mental pressure of keeping up with the airplane and all the other duties that go on. So for the captain to be on rest break is normal. Additionally, the first officers are type rated and have demonstrated competency to act as a captain when the flight captain is off of the flight deck. So this is a well-developed procedure, and primarily when you look at particularly senior first officers, the difference between a senior first officer and a captain is generally their seniority with the company, because you have to attain a certain seniority before you're allowed to bid a captain, or before you're successful in bidding a captain's slot. So having two first officers flying the airplane, routine, safe, done extensively all over the world by airlines all over the world. So nothing unusual there. Now, what they ended up experiencing was unusual in that intertropical convergence zone that I referenced earlier. There were thunderstorms, and that area, because it's so churned up, it actually has pretty clean air. And the result of that was an updraft and cooling of a lot of water. The thing was that because that air was relatively clean, it didn't form ice crystals. And as it struck the pitot tubes on the side of the airplane, that gave it the nucleus to start forming into ice, and it formed very quickly and ended up blocking the pitot tubes, which caused the airspeed indications to go down significantly. There are 3 airspeed indicators. All 3 went down. And the autopilot to disconnect because it no longer had valid input from the airspeed sensors. So all of this happened very unexpectedly. It was bumpy, and the pilot in the left seat, the junior of the 2 first officers, took manual control of the airplane, and acted inappropriately. He basically panicked, and the senior first officer was better at doing the problem solving, but he didn't override it. And as that situation unfolded, the junior pilot put flight commands in pitch that were totally inappropriate, and they stalled the airplane.
Yeah.
And as a result, one of the Airbus investigators that I talked to at one point said they had never seen an Airbus product that deeply stalled. And it was very tragic, because this individual, had he just left the airplane alone, what I mean is, don't touch it. Just let the natural stability and aerodynamic stability in the airplane just stay alone, and that would have let them fly out of the icing condition. The airspeed returned in about a little over 50 seconds. So they only were in this airspeed, a loss of airspeed condition for less than a minute. But the overreaction of this junior first officer and the inputs that he made, that it took what is a problem and turned it into a crisis.
Yeah.
And from that way, the airplane stalled multiple times on the way down. The captain did return to the flight deck, was getting very conflicting information from the two pilots. And finally, they ended up impacting the water. So this is not the first time that this has happened. It's happened to some Boeing airplanes. It's happened to other Airbus airplanes. It's a rare event, but it's not unheard of to have the pinot tubes overcome by icing conditions.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead.
What you learn is, I call it hurry slowly, and it's don't start making big inputs when you've got a stable flying airplane. The pitch is good. The airspeed was stable. You can look at the ground speed indication and get an idea. And you know that with the amount of thrust produced by the engines and the pitch, you're in a good part of the envelope. You're in a safe part of the envelope. So the actions of this first officer were, it went counter to the training that he had had. So it's very tragic. But let me say one thing here, George.
Yeah.
The French authorities that have charged Airbus and Air France criminally it's a travesty, because in aviation safety, when you bring criminal charges in for an action that was not intentional, you diminish people's willingness to talk to investigators and let us figure out what we can do to prevent a reoccurrence. So the criminalization of aviation accidents, which is done in some countries around the world, France being one, in my view, can easily run counter to the overall goal of increasing aviation safety.
Yeah, and I'm not an aviation expert. I'm just a man on the street. Now, I used to cover courts and criminal stuff in broadcasting when I was doing the journalism thing many years ago. But my take on it has always been, if you're going to take someone to court, really focus on and really punish those that do something purposely.
Right.
And when you see a manslaughter charge, I'm looking at that and thinking, man, that sounds like they believe that somebody did something purposely. Accidents happen. No malintent was intended here. It killed all on board, including those that made the mistakes. And if there's anybody that I would think that maybe would get a little bit of slack, it would be, that first officer that you talked about. Honest to God, the guy didn't do that on purpose. But yeah, it is interesting that it went that way. Well, let me bring this back up on. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention here. You talked about how just take your hands off of it and leave it alone. You think, well, hell, nobody would do that. Well, that actually is kind of taught, isn't it? I mean, that's a real thing.
Yes, it is. It is that if you have a stable condition, think twice before upsetting it. And one of the outgrowths of this and the Colgan accident in Buffalo was to say, okay, why did these pilots respond so inappropriately? What can we do in the training of pilots to improve that? And that's the sort of thing that accident investigators really focus on, is preventing reoccurrence. And consequently, these two accidents, Colgan 3407 and Air France 447, were basically watershed events to move the industry forward better in upset recovery training. And that's a positive. So as tragic as these accidents are, as catastrophic as they are, we can't go back and fix those things. What we can do is improve training, improve design, improve the environment overall to continue to have improvement in aviation safety overall, which is the safest form of transportation ever designed by mankind. So we've done some good things. Is it good enough for tomorrow? No, it's not. And that's where we've got to focus. And that's why I say the criminalization aspect can easily run counter to that effort.
Well, let me continue here with the article, bring up some other things out, some of what we've talked about here. It says, as a storm buffeted the plane, the ice crystals presented at high altitudes disabled the pitot. How do you pronounce it? I said pitot, but that's not correct.
Yeah, I pronounce it pitot tubes. That's the way
Okay.
that, it was, I guess I learned it.
Yeah, pitot tubes, blocking speed and altitude information. The autopilot disconnected. Okay, so come on, just do a visualization here. There's been a lot of excellent reenactments. We're going to show a little bit of that coming up. But you've got these two, not junior officers, but less experienced pilots at the controls here. They're flying along on autopilot. Everything's going along smoothly. And then the autopilot disconnected. Now, they're not expecting that, obviously, but it's not the end of the world. All you got to do is fly. I mean, they are pilots, but that ain't what happened, folks. And here's these pitot tubes that we talked about shown here. They're not very big. They don't look very significant. I had seen them on planes before until this happened and thought, well, I don't know what those are, some kind of sensor or something. But in this incident, Captain, they were everything, and they iced over. It screwed up the autopilot, and these guys had to fly, and it didn't work out. Here it is. These are pitot tubes also to show what they look like. Okay, so the question here is, has this science changed? Are these things still as made like this? Are they still as significant to flying as they were then?
Oh, yeah. They're very much like that. Now, what they have done on almost all airliners that I'm aware of, they have increased the heating capability, because anytime that you're at high altitude, the outside air temperature is well below freezing. So if you encounter water at that altitude, it's either ice or it's about to be ice. And so they have heating elements in here to ensure that that ice remains in a liquid state, which is then vented out of a drain that's designed for that. This heater was known not to be as effective as they had desired, and there was a program underway for all A330s to change those pitot tubes, which improve the heating capability. The accident airplane had not gotten those new tubes yet. I've lost you, George.
Yeah, sorry there. I didn't see that light earlier. Okay, that it was actually muted. Okay, so I'll go back to this. The crew resumed manual piloting, but with erroneous navigation data, the plane went into an aerodynamic stall. And I like the fact that they word it like that, because they talk about stalls all the time. And guys like me, Captain, we see that and think, well, the engine's quit. I mean, that's what happens when your car stalls. That's not what an aerodynamic stall is. It has to do with airflow over the wings and the attitude of the plane. And maybe you can explain it better than I can.
A stall is the point at which the wing quits producing enough lift to sustain flight. And it can happen at any attitude, because it's the difference in the way that the wing is pointed and the relative wind coming over the top of the wing. And when you get a given angular difference between those two, the air cannot stay attached to the wing, which means it can't produce lift. And that is an aerodynamic stall.
Okay. Now, the pilots did not understand what was happening to them, a difficulty of interpretation in an all-digital aircraft, like all the aircraft in the world today. Well, it's easy to be wrong, Gerald Fetzler, a former pilot and pilot trainer. Now, he's with Air France. All right, this is a little small. I'll bring this up. The Airbus knew since at least 2002, this is what the captain was talking about problems with the type of speed sensor that malfunctioned on an Air France passenger plane that went down in June. The Associated Press has learned. Now, this is retrospective, so they're talking about this back then. Air safety authorities did not order their replacement until after the crash, which killed all 228 people aboard. The tubes, they're about, and I had those photos up earlier, but they're about the size of an adult hand, or they were anyway, and fitted to the underbelly of a plane and vulnerable to blockage from water and icing. Experts have suggested that Flight 447 sensors made by French company SA may have iced over and sent false speed information to the computers as the plane ran into that thunderstorm. at about 35,000 feet. So there they are again, showing that. Let me take that down off screen here, because I want to play. I mentioned earlier, the captain. You know, a lot of people have seen him. They're best known. He's best known for this television work, and I've got this clip for why planes crash, and he's on it, and it's about this Airbus 447 crash. It's really good stuff. I'm gonna play this, and it's only a few seconds, maybe a minute the most. We'll come right back.
The wings lose lift, and the airplane stalls. It begins to free fall, descending steeply at 10,000 feet per minute. But there is confusion in the cockpit. The pilots don't realize that the plane has stalled.
Lowering the nose is the appropriate and only appropriate action that a pilot must take. Reattachment of airflow over the wings, get the wings producing lift, and then fly out of the stalled condition.
But the co-pilot in the right seat does the opposite, continuing to pull up.
This is the last thing that you would want to do. This is very counter to the training received. Why this occurred, it's one of the great mysteries of 447.
The co-pilots have been trying to reach the captain since the autopilot disconnected. It takes 90 seconds before he returns to the flight deck.
They didn't brief the captain and tell him, this is what's happening. We don't have control of the airplane. They lacked then the capability of that entire team to problem solve it together.
The captain also fails to recognize that the plane is in a stall. It has been plummeting for nearly 3 minutes.
Recovery should be easily attained within 10 to 15 seconds. So the idea of it being 3 minutes in a stalled condition is extremely long.
In the final minute, the cockpit voice recorder may reveal the captain realizing that the co-pilot has been pitching up, causing the plane to stall. But I've been at max nose up for a while. No, don't climb.
Okay, so that's the captain jumping in there, and he makes the instant. No, you don't want to pull back. I mean, you want to push the nose forward. You want to get some wind or some air moving over these wings to come out of this stall. The question that I have when I see these accounts, that sounds good, and they had plenty of altitude to work with.
Right.
But at one point here, if you don't have altitude, pushing the nose forward is not going to do any good, right?
It will always help the stall condition. I mean, if you get down so low that you're going to hit the ground anyway, you're going to hit the ground with more lift than otherwise. But one thing here, and it is a function of a lot of airplanes, the Airbus products being one, is they let the airspeed get so low that the stall warning system says, oh, well, the airplane's on the ground, this is routine, and it turns off.
Oh.
So the pilot, the junior pilot that is pulling back inappropriately, he's not getting the stall warning because the airspeed's so low. And when that happens, it does create some confusion, but there are other cues in here that the airplane's buffeting. The airplane is descending at a rate that you can't stop. Those are key indicators. This airplane stalled, and the only solution out is to lower the nose, reduce what's called angle of attack, the angular difference between the air coming out of the wing and the wing itself, the curve of the wing. And when you do that, you get flow reattachment, and now the wing can create lift. That said, you need basically to increase the speed, because to stop the descent, you've got to be able to get enough pitch, positive pitch in the airplane to get it to start climbing again. So there's several things that have to go on here. Pilots practice stalls frequently, particularly in the early stages of training. So this is not a condition that they haven't seen before. Why they pull back is beyond me.
And it's counterintuitive for a layman, because you think, well, we're stalling, we're falling. Okay, pull back. No, you push it forward, you turn up the speed. Oh, well, no, that's just going to hasten the crash. No, that's actually going to get you out of the aerodynamic stall. You'll be able to level off and come out of this thing. So if you can envision this, now this goes to the side stick thing that we talked about earlier. Captain runs up to the cabin or to the cockpit and looks at what's going on. What the hell? What are you guys doing? What's going on? And guy, the the pilot in the right seat, I think, was flying, and he has was it the left seat?
It's both of them. The pilot in the left seat is the one that was actually pulling back on it. The right seat pilot tried to push forward 2 or 3 times, and so there's conflicting commands to the airplane about what the crew wants, and that's another piece of this.
Yeah, and with that side stick by the guy's leg on the side, literally, kind of hard to see what they're doing as opposed to that, yoke right in front of you. Huh?
Yeah, that is a case where they don't know the control inputs that either pilot are making because you can't really see, and the amount that side stick moves is not really a large amount. You kind of learn to fly the plane with your fingertips, so it took a bit of time for the captain to figure out what was going on. His command was exactly correct. No, 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 no. Don't climb. In other words, push forward. We got to get the airplane flying again. And sadly, the first officer did not comply with that command.
Sadly, and I've got a couple of other stories that I want to get here too. But the reason I brought this up was, and you started off with this, this could be really precedent setting. This is really interesting. Now, the good news is we don't have major airline crashes like we used to back in the 70s and 80s. So there aren't a lot of these, but this court is going to try to hold that company and that airline manufacturer criminally liable here.
They've done this before. The Concorde accident, same thing. They charged Continental Airlines, they charged Air France, they charged Aerospatiale, the manufacturer of Concorde. They charged a lot of different people with that. And you see this in other countries in the world as well. And I'll reiterate it. The criminalization of an aircraft accident can be counterproductive to aviation safety. Now, if it's a deliberate act, if there's a criminal action involved, willful disregard, all of those things, that's, of course, if there's a criminal component to that, by all means, yes. But an inadvertent act that results in a tragedy like Air France 447, in my view, is to have it criminalized goes against the grain of what we're trying to accomplish in aviation safety.
And some of this is societal. The example that I think of, the country that I read is most notorious for this, Russia. If something goes wrong with Russia, they're going to take those pilots and ruin them, at the very least, and imprison them. I mean, they throw them in prison. It's if they survive. Yeah.
I mean, there's a case of a Brazilian accident where a business jet struck an airliner, resulting in the loss of the airliner, a Gol Airlines flight, and they imprisoned the crew, although that crew did nothing wrong. And so there was a big fight in the courts, and it was months and months and months before they finally got that crew out. But the criminalization of aviation accidents can be counterproductive.
All right, we're going to move on here. Anything else on this particular, on the 447 you want to talk about at all?
The only thing on 447, and I referenced it a minute ago, but it's important. You'd always try to get something to help the industry going forward not to have a reoccurrence. And out of 447, the realization of upset recovery training and the mandate for it for all airline pilots and the recommendation for all professional pilots, that has really improved since this accident. So it is something that the industry learned from. I mean, it was horrible to lose the airplane into the South Atlantic. The investigative agencies, BEA and others, took this accident. They did a wonderful job with the investigation. And the regulatory agencies around the world, ICAO and others, have taken the recommendations for improved upset recovery training and mandated it. And that's been a positive.
Okay, great. Let's pick this up and move along here. I mentioned off the top here that one place that folks can check out your work is in USA Today. This is one of your most recent columns. And again, it has to do with these crashes. And I had somebody that I know mention this to me just recently. Why do these small planes crash so often? And this was a question that was posed to Ask the Captain in the USA Today. Are smaller planes safe? Data shows the need for continuous improvement, says Ask the Captain. And I pulled this article just as a means of kind of emphasizing what we're talking about. This is kind of out of the heartland. It's up in Minnesota. An elementary teacher among 3 dead after plane crashes into a Minnesota house. What you're seeing on screen there, folks, is the roof. That's where this small plane went in. I'm always struck by how small the planes, they seem really small when they crash, it seems like. 3 people, including an elementary teacher, dead after a small plane crashed into a house in northern Minnesota over the weekend. According to the Hermantown Police Department, a Cessna 172 plane, man, that's a common type plane, crashed into the second floor of the home just south of the Duluth International Airport late Saturday before coming to a stop in the backyard. Police identified the dead as Tyler Fretland, 32, of Burnsville, the airplane's pilot, and passengers Alyssa Schmidt, 32, of St. Paul, and Matthew Schmidt, 31, of Burnsville. Police said the Schmidts were siblings. No one inside the home was hurt, thankfully, according to police. On the scene, first responders found wreckage of a Cessna 172 airplane. The plane, police said, hit the second floor of the house before coming to rest in the backyard of the property. So you can see here at the top, that's the rooftop, and then it went through and landed in the backyard and crashed into the backyard, I guess. And the pilot, the captain here, in his column says, recently a colleague asked him whether small airplanes are safe or not, citing recent small aircraft accidents like this one up there in northern Minnesota. Captain says, I learned to fly in a small civilian airplane. I've flown them for over 50 years and continue to fly them when possible. Yes, they are generally safe, but let's look at some statistics. Okay. Firstly, general aviation is different from commercial aviation. General aviation includes small aircraft, fixed wing, and helicopters, both commercial and privately owned. Okay, so clarify this for me a little bit, Captain, because I'm trying to think of how to quantify general aviation. If you're flying a small plane, but you're for hire, you're getting paid to fly some people.
It's still general aviation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what you have to really break the general aviation part down. And the statistics that I quote are from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association NOL report, which is one of the best out there. And I break it down into non-commercial fixed wing, like this Cessna 172 accident that you referenced, so that we get an idea of when you have professional pilots flying the airplane or when you have recreational pilots flying it. Now, there's some extremely good recreational pilots. And so it's hard to differentiate all of the different branches of general aviation. And I tried to do that in the column.
Yeah, and of course you're limited on space. But he says, according to annual data from this NOL thing that he was talking about, which includes private aircraft information, there is a continued improvement in the rate of accidents and fatalities. In 2021, there were 939 accidents with 268 fatalities, compared to 988 in 2019 pre-pandemic with 307 fatalities. Okay, and these statistics that really are in all industries, pre-pandemic and pandemic, are very interesting, Captain. When I read that, I thought, well, okay, fewer flights, and now, but there's a lot of flying right now. People are getting back at it, obviously, maybe a little pent-up demand going on. It appears like we may be a little bit safer. On one side, you've got pilots that might be a little rusty, but on the other side, they might be a little more likely to adhere to protocols and safety procedures and that type of thing because they've been off, relatively speaking, for a while. I'm talking general aviation. Do you think there's anything to that or not?
I think that there is. If you look at the 2022 numbers so far and then extrapolate them out to a full 12 months, it looks like we're going to be down with the number of accidents by about a third, which is extremely good news. And the fatalities are down about the same amount. So what we find is that the general aviation non-commercial accident rate is higher than the airlines. That's true. Higher than professionally flown. That's also true. But it is still pretty good. And we're dealing with single engine airplanes. We're dealing with pilots that may not be trained and qualified to fly in inclement weather. So there's a lot of variables in here, but when you look at the aggregate statistics of total numbers, It looks like 2022 could be a good year.
Well, and the thing that I would always say, now we're talking about pilots. There are also passengers that are going aboard with these pilots. And there ain't nothing wrong with checking out your pilot before you go on board. There's nothing wrong with turning down a flight if you don't feel safe. My own circumstance, I flew with a guy one time and he had his girlfriend in the right seat. This guy was playing grab ass during the flight with his girlfriend on a small Cessna 172 type aircraft. Put his feet up on the dash or whatever. Man, I never got back in a plane with that guy again. This kind of stuff does happen.
It does. I mean, there's, I don't care what kind of pilot you are, there needs to be a level of professionalism that goes with taking any aircraft into the air. There's a degree of professionalism that has to follow with that.
Yeah, we're going to get to that big time here because we're going to talk about that article that people wanted to have me get to. I'm going to get to it, folks, here. Okay, so the leading causes for general aviation accidents are the same as in past years. Runway excursions. This is running off the runway, landing short, overrunning the runway, lead the list. But fortunately, this accident type has a low fatality rate because you're on the ground. I mean, you got a chance to survive that.
It's slow speed.
Yeah,
the airplane is at slow speed,
yeah.
And this is what happens the most frequently. It's well over probably half of the accidents overall is a blown tire or a crosswind that wasn't handled properly, and the airplane ends up out in the grass. It may sustain damage, but if anybody's injured, they're typically minor injuries. So the most common type of accident has the lowest number of fatalities.
All right, good. Let's see. Did I have it now? Okay. Fatalities are most frequent in loss of control accidents. Sadly, this type of accident is the leading cause of fatalities and has been for many years. The unintentional stall. Remember, we talked about stall earlier. It's not the engine's quitting. It's an aerodynamic stall that they're talking about here of the aircraft accounts for almost half of this type of accident.
Yeah.
What is behind most general aviation accidents? While pilot experience is important and many think is the most important factor in accidents, it's equally important for pilots to be proficient and have recency of experience. Now, this is what we talked about also. So far in 2022, the number of non-commercial fixed-wing accidents down by about a third, from around 1,000 per year to a forecast of 660 in 2022. And there's plenty of flying taking place, so that's significant. Part of this is due to the lower number of flights, but some are due to increased vigilance by pilots. The number of fatalities is also down from around 165 per year to a forecast of 96 in 2022. Okay, the thing that I wanted to ask here, now if you're falling from 38,000 feet like Air France 447 that we talked about earlier, I mean, no aircraft design is going to save you, obviously, but does design are planes any safer for like these excursions, for instance? Is there any likelihood that you're more likely to survive one of those? And what about these parachutes on these small planes? I read about those. Do those things work, and are they saving lives?
Airplanes stall differently, and you have to learn the stall characteristics of the individual aircraft types that you fly. Some are very benign. Others are what the aerodynamicists call crisp. It's producing lift, and then it's not. And it's a pretty significant loss of lift. And if you're in the airplane, you can really feel the nose drop in a hurry. So each individual wing has slightly different stall characteristics, and pilots are expected to understand the airplane that they are flying stall characteristics. Aircraft like the Cirrus that have these ballistic parachutes in them can be very, very beneficial, because if you do end up in a loss of control event, now you have something you can do about it. Otherwise, in a conventional airplane, you have to solve that loss of control event with appropriate control input, which requires a pretty good understanding theoretically of the aerodynamics and what's going on with the wing. Let me say one thing, George. In the process of training at one point, I had a specially designed training aircraft at 32,000 feet, and we fully stalled it intentionally because we were doing a documentary basically for some training, and even with the very thin air at 32,000 feet, I was able to recover the airplane in less than 1,000 feet, knowing what had to be done, putting the control inputs of the proper magnitude, letting the airplane recover, giving it time, and then flying out of it. So if it's done well and if it's done appropriately, you don't have to lose a lot of altitude here, regardless of the altitude of the onset of the stall.
And then why did 447 do what it did? I mean, it is a great mystery. When they're training pilots, we talk about the mechanical training of this and the simulators and that type of thing. Do they do any psychological testing of individuals to see how they respond to crises, to terrors? I mean, some people freeze, some people don't. Maybe not in all circumstances. Some people just grab the yoke and pull back till they die. I mean,
generally speaking, if you're going to be a professional pilot, you will have gone through simulator sessions that are very high stress. It's designed that way. And consequently, people who do not deal with stress well typically don't make it through the training program.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I got to get to this because this was promoted. This is what some people wanted. I mean, this is really hard to believe. And we're going to draw on the captain's experience here because, I mean, this guy has got the bona fides. I mean, he's got the experience. He has been around. This is an unbelievable story. Let me take this silly graphic off the screen here. I mean, this is real, folks. A pilot is suing Southwest after a colleague exposes himself. This is from the AP out of Fort Lauderdale. A Southwest Airlines pilot is suing the company, her union, and a former colleague who pleaded guilty last year to deadbolting the cockpit door during a flight and stripping naked in front of her. Christine Janning alleges that Southwest retaliated by grounding her after she reported Michael Hawk to the company and the FBI, that it kept him employed despite an alleged history of sexual misconduct, and that managers disparaged her in memos. Oh, okay, there's several graphs here that I'm going to get to, but Captain, right off the top here, one thing that struck me odd here, I thought these doors were always bolted or locked in flight. What?
They are. They are locked. What you can do is there is a code you can use to get in when the door is in normal, and the crew members know those codes. You can lock the door where the codes no longer work, which is what happened here.
Oh, okay. So let's continue here with this. She also alleges that the Southwest Airlines Pilot Association conspired with the airline and refused to support her. She's suing Hawk for sexual assault. Now, again, he pleaded guilty last year to a federal misdemeanor charge of committing a lewd, indecent, or obscene act and was sentenced to probation. Hawk's attorney, Michael Salnick, said Wednesday that his client disrobed only after Janning encouraged him to, never did anything else, and that there were no previous incidents. Southwest said it supported Janning and that it would vigorously defend itself against the lawsuit. The union did not respond to a phone call for comment. Now, the Associated Press doesn't normally identify people who say they are victims of sex crimes, but Janning, through her attorney, agreed to the use of her name. According to the lawsuit filed last week in Orange County, Florida, Janning had never met Hawk before August 2020 when she was his co-pilot on a flight from Philadelphia to Orlando. She says Hawk, a 27-year veteran of the airline, had used his seniority rights the previous day to bump another pilot who had been scheduled to command the flight. Janning believes that's because he saw a woman was the scheduled co-pilot. Janning said that when they reached cruising altitude, Hawk told her this was his final flight and there was something he wanted to do before retirement. She said he bolted the door so no flight attendant could enter. He then put the plane on autopilot, stripped off his clothes, began watching pornography on his laptop, and committed a lewd act for 30 minutes while taking photos and videos of himself. Now, folks, this is at altitude. They're cruising. I'm in the back riding along, expecting the utmost decorum and professionalism by our flight crew, and this is what's taking place on this Southwest flight. Salnick, the attorney, said it was Janning who asked Hawk if there was anything he wanted to do before retiring. When he replied he wanted to fly naked, she told him to go ahead and then made sexual advances after he disrobed, Salnick said. Hawk rejected those and adamantly, God, I can't, denied a lewd act had occurred. Meanwhile, Janning didn't report the incident to a Southwest employee relations investigator until 3 months later. She said she wanted, or that she waited because her boss had disparaged her to a male colleague previously. She said she asked the investigator not to inform her boss, but she did. Janning says she was soon told that because Hawk had retired, the airline's investigation was closed. Janning then went to the FBI, which charged Hawk. She alleges Southwest had sent Hawk to a Montreal sexual harassment counseling center after 2008 incident involving a flight attendant. Sonic said his incident never happened and Hawk was never sent to a counseling center. So you've got some disagreement there. She also said that on the day she was grounded, the airline stranded her in Denver, and the FBI had to book her on a United Airlines flight so she could return home to Florida. She said a Southwest manager sent a memo to more than 25 employees that made baseless allegations about her flying competency. Boy, that's weird. Southwest denied Janning's allegations, saying, "We immediately supported Janning by cooperating with the appropriate outside agencies as they investigated. Our corporate culture is built upon treating others with mutual respect and dignity, and the events alleged in the situation are inconsistent with the behavior that we require of our employees," the statement read. Janning said that when she contacted the union, its leaders did nothing to help her, but did write a letter to Hawk's judge during his misdemeanor case saying he had a spotless record. No hearings have been scheduled. Okay, that kind of speaks for itself, Captain. I don't expect you to have a lot of comment on that, but there is one thing about this that I wanted to get your perspective on, and we've talked about this before on my show. You know, when I first started flying as a passenger on an airline, I remember the flight crew coming through the airport in their, freshly pressed outfits and all that, and they were treated with great deference and reverence. And you expected this professional, and it was kind of the era. And the question is, has that changed? I mean, we see these videos now of flight attendants being punched. I mean, coming down an aisle of an airplane, and all of this misbehavior by passengers directed at the flight crew. And you think, well, that's just the craziness of the current political situation and the current pandemic, as a lot of it has to do with wearing masks and that type of thing, and that will change. I guess my question for you is, do you believe it will change? Are we ever going to get back to the way that it was? And maybe that would prevent some of this stuff, and maybe even, the captain taking his clothes off in flight.
Let me first say the fact that the retired captain admitted guilt.
Yeah.
Tells me that the lack of professionalism to me is totally I don't understand it. It's unconscionable. So one of these things of what was he thinking, that this was going to be a good idea? I mean, it's beyond me. I mean, obviously the mental health of this individual is one of the issues that will come into play. Now, there's so many allegations and cross allegations that I'll leave it to the court to decide who did what and so forth. I don't think we have information that we on your podcast can say, okay, definitively he did something or she did something or the union didn't respond well. I think all of those are matters to be determined by the court. However, the fact that the retired captain said, oh, yes, I was at cruise altitude and elected to fly naked, that there is no excuse for that. There is none. And your comment about the professionalism of the industry, if you go back many years, even in the early years when I was with the airlines, there was a treatment of pilots that you were sort of an elite of an elite. It's still very difficult to become an airline pilot. It is a lot of training and a lot of study, a lot of effort put forward to even be a candidate for that. So I think that the industry or the profession is still well regarded. You are 100% right about the increase in number of unruly passengers and the abuse that the flight attendants are taking, which I only have one comment. Any unruly passenger that notably, particularly physically strikes a flight crew member,
God, yeah.
should be incarcerated for the maximum allowed by law. And in that way, hopefully, we can create an environment that says, hey, it's not worth it. Additionally, I support the idea of a industry-wide no-fly list. So if a flight attendant is abused on a United flight, that passenger doesn't hop on Southwest and feel like it's okay because they're no longer on United. So, and I know Delta Airlines and others have been a promoter of an industry-wide no-fly list. I think it's a good idea from an aviation safety standpoint. But in the end, this captain showed a massive, massive failure of professionalism, and basically was a disgrace to the profession.
Yeah, and I chose to highlight that. Obviously, the headline on it will jump out at you and make you want to cover it. Now, I picked that Air France 447 flight because of the outstanding reenactments and the really the investigative work that went into that. And by the way, watch Why Planes Crash with a Captain. They've got an excellent reenactment there. Another one, Nova, PBS, they did one that's great. All that stuff's on YouTube, and that's where I got that clip as well. I mean, it's chilling. I mean, it's really fascinating stuff. And of course, you're going to see it in the news here in the next couple of weeks as this moves through the courts. Anything here in closing, Captain? We're coming up to the top of the hour. Yeah.
No, as always, George, I enjoy the conversations with you and doing the podcast.
All right, great. I wish you well. You take care. We'll get you back very soon because I love talking this, and I love Captain Cox. Folks, Captain Cox, he's Ask the Captain guy from the USA Today. That's probably where people know him best right now. He's on in the newspapers all the time. And of course, he's on Mayday and Why Planes Crash and those great shows that I like so much. I hope you appreciate seeing him on Podcast by George. If you do, here's your chance. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a like, give us a follow there. If you're watching on YouTube, ring the notification bell, subscribe, or if you're listening in audio here, we record these and put them up on audio after we live stream them on iTunes and Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, all those places where podcasts are heard. Give us a thumbs up, a 5-star review, subscribe, follow us there as well. But that is going to do it. That's going to wrap it up. That's all there is. And there ain't no more. That's another podcast by George.